Well, it does look unique, I'll give it that. Sitting below the top spec Maxus D60 Elite is this D60 Pro, the base model 5-seater variant of Maxus midsize SUV. In this video, we will take a tour of the Maxus D60 Pro and see if a lower price makes it a better value. Let's do this. Hello guys, I'm Regan and welcome back to another car review. If you're new to my channel, I hope you click that subscribe button for your regular dose of Philippine automotive content. If you're my subscriber already, well, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show after you click that like button. Also, special thanks to Maxus Philippines for lending us the Maxus D60 Pro to do this review. The D60 Pro occupies a pretty unique niche. It's as big as most midsize SUVs and crossovers, yet it only has 5 seats. It looks futuristic and expensive, yet it's the most affordable midsize SUV you can purchase locally today. Its top-spec brother, the Maxus D60 Elite, already has a compelling price, yet this base model D60 Pro takes it a notch lower. Now, the D60 Pro has a retail price of 1,148,000 Philippine pesos, making it more affordable than all the compact crossovers available in the Philippines today. And yes, that also includes the compact crossovers that are coming from China. Now, considering that affordable price level, what sort of features or driving performance can we expect from the Maxus D60 Pro? Well, that's what this video aims to find out. If you watch my Maxus D60 Elite review video, you'll know that the D60 kinda reminds me of Godzilla. Now, the base model D60 Pro still reminds me of Godzilla, but this is teenager Godzilla because of that chrome strip found on its front grille. Now, that chrome strip kind of reminds me of braces on Godzilla's teeth. Still, this D60 Pro still gets the same LED DRLs that are mounted here up top, and they also double as your turn signals. And these LED DRLs reminds me of Godzilla's eyes. However, the D60 Pro only has to make do with halogen headlights here, and when you pair those yellow halogen headlights with the white LED DRLs, yeah, the effect is kinda hypnotic. Still, the whole front fascia of this D60 Pro looks a bit friendlier than the more imposing and intimidating top-spec D60 Elite, mainly because of this front grille that looks a bit smaller because of that chrome strip. Here on the side, the base model Pro gets the same designed roof rails that can be found in the top-spec Elite, but the trim that's found on the D-pillar has been blacked out versus the same color and material that can be found in the roof rails of the top-spec D60 Elite. By doing this, well, the base model Pro has effectively removed the best design cue that I've found on the side of the Maxus D60 Elite. Even if you pair it with the body lines and the same muscular haunches here, well, the effect is no longer the same. This base model D60 Pro looks kinda ordinary to me now. Now, the base model Pro also lost the power folding side mirrors here, but at least it still gets LED turn signals. The wheels of this thing also doesn't do it any justice because, well, these are smaller 17-inch alloy wheels versus the 18s that can be found in the top-spec Elite. These smaller wheels, when you pair it with the muscular and chunky body of this D60 Pro, makes the D60 Pro look more like Johnny Bravo. Now, these alloy wheels are wrapped in 215/65 R17 tires. And if you look at the side, the lower part of the side, you'll see that we also don't get that stepboard anymore. It's not really a big issue, guys, because, well, the D60 Pro is still a pretty low crossover. Now, behind these wheels, we get the same mechanical bits that can be found in the top-spec D60 Elite. We have 4-wheel disc brakes here, and for your suspension, we have a MacPherson setup in the front and a multi-link rear suspension at the back. Now, the ground clearance is at 180 millimeters, similar to the top-spec Maxus D60 Elite. Here at the rear, the base model D60 Pro only gets a few cuts to keep the price down. It still gets the same gorgeous LED taillights here with that LED light bar in the middle that we first saw in the top spec Maxus D60 Elite. This LED light bar has this gorgeous crystal-like housing here, and it truly makes this D60 stand out, especially at night. Now it also gets the same trunk lid opener that's integrated here on the rear glass wiper, and it's a great way to prank a lot of mall security guards. However, the D60 Pro only gets a pair of faux exhaust garnishes on the rear bumper instead of the functional twin exhaust pipes that can be found in the top spec D60 Elite. It's not really a big issue for me, guys, because, well, this is still a mid-size family crossover. So yeah, I don't really see the need for any sporty touches in this behemoth right here. Now when we pop open the trunk, you'll see the biggest difference here between the D60 Pro and the D60 Elite. You see, the D60 Pro only gets 5 seats versus the 7 seats that can be found in the D60 Elite. Now the trunk capacity of this thing is still the same at 900 liters, and it's good enough to fit a medium-sized luggage plus 2 more of the same medium-sized luggage. So you can put around 3 to 4 medium-sized luggage in this massive cargo space. The base model D60 Pro gets the same engine and drivetrain that can be found in the top spec D60 Elite. This is a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine that puts out 167 horsepower and 250 Nm of torque. Now the power is sent to the front wheels via a 7-speed dry-type dual-clutch transmission. Now, fuel economy figures of this base model Pro is pretty similar to the top spec Elite, with the city driving returning to me 8 kilometers per liter and the highway drive returning 15 kilometers per liter. The Maxus D60 Pro doesn't stray too far away from the cockpit of the D60 Elite, although we do get several feature cuts here to keep the price low. The first feature cut is the key. You see, the base model Pro only makes do with a standard key here. It doesn't get an engine push start system or a smart key fob that we saw in the D60 Elite. Now let me just put this thing back here because it's quite warm and I need some air conditioning. There you go. Now the second feature cut that we have here are the seats. The base model Pro only gets fabric seats here versus the faux leather seats that can be found in the D60 Elite. However, guys, if you were to ask me, I'd go for these fabric seats more because these are softer and more comfortable than the faux leather seats that I saw in the D60 Elite. Now, another feature cut here, guys, is, well, the steering wheel. This base model Pro only makes do with a urethane steering wheel, although it's made to look like it's made of leather or faux leather. But trust me on this, guys, this is urethane. It's not leather at all. So it's another, well, downgrade from the top spec D60 Elite. Now, the steering wheel still has your buttons for hands-free connectivity and for your cruise control. And the wheel also just tilts. It doesn't really telescope, guys. Similar to the top spec model, so we can't really expect the base model to have a telescoping function because, well, the top spec Elite doesn't also get that. Now, when you look at the instrument gauge cluster here, we have the same layout and format here. We have an analog tach and an analog speedo in a European format. And we have a large colored multi-information display in the middle for your vital vehicle information. Now, when you move over to your infotainment system, well, I had a few words to say about the infotainment system of the top spec D60 Elite, and these are the same words that I will share in this D60 Pro. You see, they get the same setup, which means that it's pretty crappy. We get an 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system here that doesn't have Apple CarPlay. It doesn't have Android Auto, it doesn't have smartphone mirroring, it only has Bluetooth connectivity, and it also has the image of a reverse camera, which if you would look at it, guys, it might as well not be there. You see, the image quality is pretty dark, it's really not that good, guys. So if you try to park this thing at night, you could practically see nothing there. Now, if you try to park this thing on a bright sunny day, guys, the way this thing is angled, yeah, and if you don't have any tint on your windshield, the glare from the sun will also render the image of the reverse camera practically useless, guys. Now, when you move over to the climate control setup here, we have here the same manual climate control setup that we saw in the D60 Elite. And it's a little bit quirky, guys, because it doesn't respond as quickly as the other systems that I've tested. So even if it looks pretty gorgeous, well, the functionality of this climate control setup is, it leaves much to be desired, guys. Now, this area, the infotainment system and the climate control system, are some of the key areas that I would like Maxus to improve on. And I know that they can improve on this because this is not the system that the D60s in China gets. So I'm pretty sure that that more high-tech system that they have there in mainland China would have better functionalities than the ones that we get here in the Philippines. Now, when you move down from that, climate control and that infotainment system, we have here, of course, your shifter that is surrounded by a sea of glossy piano black finishes here, as well as the most important button here in the center tunnel of the D60. And I'm not talking about the electronic park brake button here, guys. I'm talking about the button to turn off traction control. You see, the D60 has the most aggressive traction control system that I've ever encountered in all the cars that I've reviewed. The traction control setup of this thing will engage immediately the moment that it detects the slightest wheel slippage on your front wheels. Now, what it does, guys, is when it starts to detect that slippage, it will cut all the power that's going to the wheels. So it's super aggressive in that way, and it just won't work if you're trying to negotiate a steep and wet parking ramp. And that's exactly the kind of parking ramp that I have in the place where I live. So yeah, I have to turn the traction control system off every single time I have to park this thing because otherwise I will lose all power and I won't be able to go up my parking ramp. Okay, guys, so now next we also have here the button for your electronic park brake, and it also has an auto hold feature. These are really good features to have, guys. And we also have a pair of cup holders here, which I will subject to my clean canteen test. Now, these are squarish looking cup holders, but as you can see, it can marginally pass my clean canteen. So that's also another win for this D60 Pro. Now, when it comes to the safety bits of this base model Pro, as you can see on the screen, it has a decent set of safety bits, but it's also another area that I feel that Maxus could improve on, especially since a lot of the other offerings at its price level are stepping up their safety game when it comes to safety features. So yeah, it's decent, but it's also something that that can be improved further. Now we also have here a faux leather wrapped center armrest. We have a tiny little pad here that is supposed to be a wireless charge pad, but this base model Pro doesn't get that. Well, the Elite also doesn't get it, so yeah, it's just there to where you can park your smartphone. And yeah, we have another cubby here, right there inside that center console. Now, if you look at the cabin materials they used here, well, Maxus is pretty known for giving us some really good cabin materials, and this base model D60 Pro also gets the same. We get soft touch materials here on the top of the dashboard, some nice leather wrapping here on the middle dashboard, and also on your elbow rest here in the door cards. However, I still find it kind of weird that some of the basic functionalities of this thing, like the infotainment system and the climate control setup, are, well, a little bit, a few steps behind. And when it comes to the climate control system, it's a little bit glitchy. So yeah, I really just hope that Maxus would really improve on those things, and it would be gold. Step inside the back seat of the Maxus D60 Pro, and some of my complaints up front are a little bit forgiven. You see, the D60 Pro is a no-frills base model mid-size crossover that's priced at the same level as a subcompact crossover. So yeah, it's really the space that you're buying when it comes to this car. You see, guys, I'm 5'6", and this is my driving position, and I've got a whopping 8 inches of knee room here and a good 7 inches of headroom. Now, that's not really so bad because, wow, this is really a humongous amount of space, especially for the price that the Maxus D60 Pro comes in at. Now, Maxus also knows to give its backseat passengers more amenities because, well, we get a couple of rear AC vents here, we get a USB charge port, a 12-volt outlet, and even a center armrest with a pair of cup holders. Now we also have a set of isofix anchors here to complete the amenities here at the back. Alright guys, so we're now driving the base model Maxus D60 Pro, and well, Maxus is part of the SAIC umbrella, just like MG and the joint venture partnership with Volkswagen. Now the good thing here though is SAIC has bestowed this D60 with a good level of steering feel. You see, it's an electric power assist system, but it's also quite light when you're driving it at slow city speeds like what we're doing now. But guys, when you take it up to the highway, well, it gains a bit more heft and a bit more response, something that I didn't expect really from an electric power assist system at this price level. So yeah, that's one of the good points about this base model Maxus D60 Pro. It has a good level of steering feel and response. Now, just like the top spec Maxus D60 Elite, well, the suspension of this base model Pro is tuned really more for comfort. It's got a lot of body lean when you try to take a corner at a fast clip, and yeah, it just feels softer in fact. In fact, it feels a tad bit softer than the top spec Maxus D60 Elite, and that's primarily because of the thicker sidewall that we get in these 17-inch alloy wheels. So because it feels softer, it kind of tends to be floaty at highway speeds, and it kind of wallows around when you're driving it. It feels like a mother duck waddling her tail as you're driving this Maxus D60 Pro. Now, when it comes to the driving character of this base model D60 Pro, well, I'm not really fond of its transmission tuning. You see, this has a 7-speed dry type dual clutch transmission, and yes, I've driven dual clutches before. I mean, many times already. I've driven wet types, I've driven dry types. This one has a dry type DCT similar to the offerings from Volkswagen. However, the dual clutch transmissions from Volkswagen are smoother than what this Maxus D60 has. In fact, I'm having a bit of a challenging time trying to find that perfect mix of gas pedal throttle input in order to make this thing as smooth as possible, guys. It tends to jerk a lot more than the other dry type DCTs that I've driven, especially when you're driving it in stop and go traffic. Another thing about this though is whenever you're driving around in normal mode, which is the drive setting, well, the engine doesn't really have that much oomph to begin with, you know. It feels heavy. It feels like it's struggling to put the power down. Now, the story changes when you shift it to sport mode. It becomes a bit more responsive, and I would highly recommend that you put it in sport mode most of the time. However, if you do that, well, you are sacrificing a good bit of fuel efficiency. So there's that. That's another compromise, guys. Now, I just wish that Maxus tuned the DCT of this thing to be a bit smoother than what it is now, because well, for me, guys, that's one of the biggest things that I'm looking for in the car, and that's the drive response of the vehicle. Now, when it comes to the NVH levels, well, this D60 Pro has pretty much the same level of NVH as the top spec D60 Elite, which means that it gets above average levels of NVH. Considering the price that you're paying for this thing, this is pretty solid and pretty quiet at the same time. When you go up to the highway, there's just a slight hint of wind noise coming to the cabin. Nothing too offensive, guys. It's just pretty much normal for practically any vehicle that's not a Rolls-Royce. Yeah, so NVH levels, it is pretty good. It's above average considering the price level that this D60 Pro can be bought for. Overall, guys, well, this base model Maxus D60 Pro offers me quite an uninspiring drive, especially when you put it in just normal mode. Toggle it into sport mode and the drive improves a little bit. But given that it has a pretty temperamental dry dual clutch transmission, well, it kind of throws a wrench into the whole thing. Now, I do hope that Maxus would consider improve the tuning of this transmission, because it's the only It's the only bummer, it's the only sore point that I can see in what could have otherwise been a pretty decent crossover. The biggest advantage of the Maxus D60 Pro is its size, its looks, and of course, its price. It looks like a futuristic midsize SUV priced at the same level as most value subcompact crossovers or even subcompact sedans. However, this low price meant that a lot of functional compromises had to be made, from the infotainment system to the actual drive itself. Now, unfortunately for Maxus, these two areas are what matters the most to me and apparently to a lot of people. So if Maxus truly wants to break through our market, well, they'll have to address those areas of concern in order to do that. Because sometimes, guys, looks just ain't enough. Thanks for watching.